Good morning, friends. I hope that you are safe at home and studying your academic curricula very patiently. This is my first dialogue with the MSc Part 4 students because this is a sort of a popular lecture which I wish to deliver. Obviously, this is a component of plant physiology specialization. And here we are dealing with understanding the basics of what is the main purpose of plant physiology as such, as a discipline, and furthermore, what is the role of importance of plant physiology in agriculture. Now, there are two different approaches when we see these aspects, and to understand it more better, I wish to share my presentation. So I will share the presentation now, and I request all of you even to go ahead and use your entire screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Well, our topic of discussion is introduction to plant physiology and its importance in agriculture. Now, what is the need and what is the plant physiology itself? The plant physiology is nothing but it is a study of vital phenomenon in the plant. Now, this is a very interesting and typical word which has been borrowed from the animals. What is the vitality? Vitality is nothing but it is a life. It is that character which separates the biotic component from the abiotic component. So vitality is nothing but it is the livingness, and the plant physiology is the aspect which studies this particular livingness phenomenon in the plants. When we talk about the plant physiology, if we say it's animal physiology, obviously it is related with the animals. So physiology is nothing but it is the understanding the mechanism, it is understanding the components of the relationship between the structure and function. For example, we can talk in terms of a whole plant, the holistic approach, and the other activities which are or other functions which are taking up in the plants. We can take on an organ and its function. We can take on a tissue and its function. We can take on a cell and its function. Even we can take on a small cell organelle and its function. And likewise, we can have a understanding of what is the structural basis and what is its role in the functional component. And because of that, it is one of the most important, you can say, the activity, a discipline in the whole understanding of the plants. And obviously, because of that, plant physiology is nothing but it is a study of vital phenomena. Now, it is a science which is concerned with two components. One component is the processes. Process is nothing but it is the activities, mechanisms, the roles, the ways, the paths which are taking up in a methodological manner, in a systematic manner. in a channelized manner. And to undergo this process, obviously what it requires is a platform. What it requires is a structure. And for that purpose, physiology also involves the study of its structure. So it may be the ultrastructure of a cell, ultrastructure of any cell organelle. For example, when we study the photosynthesis, we study the ultrastructure of the chloroplast. When we study the respiration, obviously we study the mitochondria. If at all we want to study the transportation, we want to study the xylem or phloem or even the cell wall or the cell membrane as such. So the process involves a systematic path, systematic role, which is having a platform, a structure, a structural platform, and then the second component is the functions. So ultimately, this whole process is taking up because of to achieve something. So as a result of this metabolism, as a result of this function, as a result of this activity, something else happens. For example, there is a activity which is taking place in the mitochondrion, and because of the growth of the plant will take place. The activities of the photosynthesis will take place, and because of the plant growth and development will take place. Because of the activity of the hormones, the flowering will take place. So in this way, the processes which are taking up, these processes, they are oriented, they are focused. And as a goal of this, ultimately what we see as a result is a function. And ultimately when a plant performs so many activities, all these activities can be, you can say, categorized and can be formulated by various mechanisms. And because of that, the plant physiology is nothing but it is a science which is related with the structural basis. It is related with the structural basis of the processes and ultimately the functions. So ultimately it is a response of plants even to the environment, because it is always an interaction which is taking place of the environment and the plants, of the environment and the plant as a whole, or the plant as an organ. So when we talk about the environment may be of different types. We can go ahead with a form of a metachromic form or single component, for example, the temperature, light, or the concentration of oxygen, concentration of CO2, or the environment as such, the air, the water, or the soil, likewise. And so it is a response of the plants to the environment, and ultimately the study of growth and development. So ultimately the plant physiology is responsible to understand the mechanism of growth, the mechanism of development. Development means right from the seed germination to seed setting, seed formation at the end. So vegetative phase and reproductive phase together. So it is a study of the growth and development that results from such a responses. Responses means such activities. So ultimately, it helps to understand the various biological processes in plants. Obviously, these are the biological processes, means these are activities which are taking place in the living organism. We never consider these activities from the dead organisms or dead material. So it helps to understand the various biological processes in the plants, like the photosynthesis and respiration. When we consider the mature plant, obviously the transpiration, there is uptake of water and the movement of water vapor from the stomata, translocation. So it is a movement of organic and inorganic nutrients across the tissues, across the cells, across the organs. That is called the translocation. So it is a long distance transport. Obviously the nutrient uptake, or this nutrient uptake also, it takes place from two different positions. So one nutrient uptake takes place from the soil to plant. So it is an upward movement. So most of the inorganic nutrients which are present in the soil, they are present in the dissolved form, they are in ionic states, and these are taken up by the xylem, and then they are used, they are utilized by the different metabolic activities by the shoot part. Obviously, along with that, there are some nutrients which are taken from the air also. For example, you do know well that the plant is taking up the oxygen from the air, The plant is taking up the CO2 from the air, and also it is utilizing it. It is consuming it. So all these, they are also governed by the plant growth regulation. So they are regulators. So these are the specific, you can say, channelizing buttons, the channelizing switches, which are triggering all these activities, and these are called as hormones. So there are plant hormones which are mediating it, forwarding it, initiating it, and also stopping it, and many other such act processes which have a profound impact on the growth, development, and ultimately the reproduction at the end. What is reproduction? In plants, the reproduction is nothing but it is a reproduction physiology. It is a setting up the flowers, the setting up of the process of whole pollination and fertilization, and undergoing and setting up the fruits and seeds at the end. So ultimately, it is a whole biological process which is involved in understanding, which is to be studied right from the seeds to the seed formation. And all this is included together in the form of a process and function together. So what are the different processes as I mentioned? So obviously it is a photosynthesis. It is nothing but it is a assimilation of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and converting it into the sugar molecules. Obviously respiration, that is breakdown of substrates and generating or releasing the biological energy in the form of ATP. Ion absorption, obviously this is nothing but inorganic nutrient uptake, and all this nutrient uptake is responsible because all these nutrients, they are important for playing a vital role in enzyme action. They are playing a vital role in formation of different cell organelles, macromolecules, and biochemical roles. Obviously translocation of organic and inorganic components. Obviously when we talk about the translocation, this is nothing but it is a long distance transport which is taking place across the cells, which is taking place across the tissues, even which is taking place across the organs. For example, source and sink relationship can also be studied here. Obviously transpiration, it is nothing but it is a force with which the water is given out through the stomata, and for this a suction pressure is created and the water is sucked from the soil. So it is a transpiration, and obviously the transpiration is responsible because of the activity of stomatal opening and closing, because the stomatal opening and closing is also a physiological phenomenon which is taking place with the help of potassium, which is taking place of the breakdown of glucose molecules in the guard cells. So it is again a physiological process. So assimilation is nothing but consumption, utilization, assimilation of carbon, assimilation of nitrogen, assimilation of hydrogen, assimilation of other components also, and formation of different macromolecules. For example, the formation of carbohydrates, the formation of proteins, the formation of lipids and their components, and ultimately all these are coming together ultimately to lead further to form a growth and development, that is building a structural component. Ultimately, as I told you, ultimately the processes also involve the flowering. Now flowering is nothing but it is the completion of vegetative phase and entering into the reproductive phase, which initiates with the flowering component. Obviously when the flowers are formed, the reproductive biology initiates with the formation of male gametes and female gametes. The fusion is taking place, the zygote is formed. Because of the zygote, there is a formation of embryo. Ultimately, the embryo is getting converted into the seed. Ultimately, if it is angiosperm, the ovary is getting converted into the fruit, and the ovule is getting converted into the seed. And because of the next component is the formation of seed. The formation of seed inside the fruit, that is the again a reproductive biological component. And ultimately the seeds which are formed, they are moving away from the parent plant. That is called the dispersal of the seeds. So it may be again a physical phenomenon, and because of that the seeds, when they fall on a suitable substratum, the another process of physiological initiation starts, and this process is called the seed germination. And that's why from the seed the next generation of plant will come up. So all this process I have just mentioned few of them. There are much more many which are involved, and all this together they are responsible to form an integrated total lifespan of the plant. And when we talk about the function, it is a natural activity of a cell, of a tissue, of an organ, or even of a chemical substance. And when we talk about its function, the formation, the origin, its development, its maturity, and its senescence or its abscission, all these four steps, they are involved in the function. So when we talk about the cell, when the cell is formed, when the cell is matured, when the cell becomes functional, and when the cell completes its activity, the cell dies. The senescence will take place. All these activities, they are involved in the function. So this is the truth which is present for the cell. The same is true for the tissues. The same is true even for the organs. And the same is true even for the plant. And because of that, the functions are nothing but these are the activities which are coordinated, which are governed, which are channelized by different activities, different forces, ultimately leading to a function of a component. When we talk about the biological component, we can talk about the cell, tissue, organ, plant, etc., etc. But the same is true even for the chemical substance. For example, how the starch is formed, the synthesis of starch, and how the starch is broken down. How a glucose is formed, how the glucose is broken down. How the proteins are formed and how the proteins are broken down. How the lipids are formed and how the lipids are broken down. So all these components, they come together and they form a building block of the plant, and that is the growth and development. Because when a new cell is formed, the cell is having its own structural entity. It's having a cell wall, it's having the cell organelles, it's having the different components, and all these are made up of chemical composition, chemicals. So all these chemicals, they are synthesized and they are doing their function, and ultimately when the function is over, they are abolished, they are removed, they are catalyzed, they are broken down, and that's why it's the whole process what is called the function. The second task of the plant physiology is to describe and explain the function of an organ, tissue, or a cell, as well as the cell organelle in the plants or cell organelle in the cell, and the function of each chemical constituent which is responsible for all these activities. That is also to be understood. Whether it can be an ion, so what can be the role of a hydrogen proton, what can be the role of a potassium ion, what can be the role of a ferric and ferrous ion, what can be the role of a magnesium ion, so on and so forth. Ion, molecule, or even a macromolecule, that is carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, etc., etc., etc. So that is the function of the physiological component. And when we talk about this function, the third component or the third task of the plant physiology is to describe and explain how the processes and functions, they respond to the change in the environment. Because ultimately these are related with the changes which are taking place in the surrounding environment, and these changes, they are taking place in the form of water, air, and soil, and all the changes, they are having an integral role and holistic role together to interact with the plant activity. Essentially, the overall goal of a plant physiology is to evolve a detailed and comprehensive knowledge of the all natural phenomenon that occur in the living plants, and thus to understand the nature of plant growth. What is meant by plant growth? The nature of development means how the different proliferation of the plant will take place and its productivity. Ultimately, what is the ultimate goal of the plant is to undergo the reproduction, to prepare the likewise, to prepare the seeds, to develop the seeds. And that's why the whole physiological process, it is having an aim, or the plant is having the aim, and that aim is nothing but production of seeds, ultimately what we call as a productivity. Now, when we talk about the generalized plant, it is called the plant physiology. But when we are studying all these components, all these parameters with a specific goal, then it is called as a, and that also related with the crops, or in agriculture, is called as a crop physiology. Now, what is the difference between the plants and crops? When we study a single plant, it can be a plant physiology. But when we study a community of the likewise plants, then it becomes a crop physiology. In crop physiology, generally, we never study, or even though we study a single plant, we study the plant as an individual sample and we draw the conclusions for the whole population. And that's why that is the difference between the plant physiology and crop physiology. Ultimately, in crop physiology also, the ultimate goal is the harvest. The ultimate goal is the yield. The ultimate goal is the production. And that's why the whole community is responsible for providing the yield. So the yield may be different depending upon for the purpose we have selected the plant. For example, if we have selected the crotalaria, the yield may be its fibers. If at all we have selected the legumes, the yield may be its proteins. If at all we have selected the cereals, the yield may be its grains. And that's why when we talk about the population physiology, then it is something different. And that's why the crop physiology is, you can say, another approach toward the community. So the plant physiology is nothing but it is a study of the ways in which the plant physiological processes are integrated, studied together to cross the whole plant responses in communities. Community means when the plant is growing together in a population to achieve a better yield. It is not a natural phenomenon, but the agricultural approach is something different. It is always to have the better crop management. And when we talk about the crop management, obviously all the plants, they are responsible for providing the better yield. And that's why these physiological processes are to be studied so as to enhance the crop production. And thus, the crop physiology includes the ways in which the knowledge of plant physiology is applied for better management of crops. When we talk about the better management of crops, it involves right from the process of germination to maximum reproductive utilization of the plant for the flowering and seed setting. So ultimately, in other words, for the better management of crops for high productivity. And that's why crop physiology, even though it studies the same phenomenon, all these phenomenon or all these processes and functions, their approach is different. Their goal is different. Their purpose of understanding is different. And that's why the crop physiology is giving us something extra, giving us something new, giving us something new approach and response when we study the populations. And that's why crop physiology is something, a new approach, innovative approach, or a special approach of plant physiology towards the crops. So when we talk about the crop physiology in agriculture, generally the different physiological processes, they are studied in the main purpose. They are studied as a main aspect, main approach. Now, which are these studied? First of all, obviously, it is nothing but the seed physiology is studied. So, right from the germination to the next component, the optimum seedling growth, that is vegetative growth, and plant population or plant formation. Then growth measurements, because ultimately they are going to provide us the quantification of the assimilate formation. Growth measurement means ultimately we are trying to find out how much yield we are going to get at the end. That is assimilate formation. And that's why growth measurements of the crops. Harvest index, ultimately that is nothing but it's the final yield. Because all these activities are to be related with the final index at the end. Then mode of action of different plant growth regulators together. When we talk about this, there is a role of plant growth regulators, hormones, and how they are interacting together again to achieve the better production. Then we go ahead with the nutriophysiology, that is the role of nutrients and their role, photoperiodism and vernalization. These are the responses of the plants toward the environment. How they are, we are going to study it further. Then transpiration efficiency or water use efficiency, because we know that we cannot provide the water to the crops every day. We never provide the water to plants every day. So that's why the transpiration efficiency and water use efficiency is a very critical component. Obviously, along with that, there are some other issues which are related with the crop physiology, and they are post-harvest physiology. Means after formation of the seeds or after formation of fruits, how they are to be consumed at the end, how they reach to the table in the kitchen. That journey is called as the post-harvest physiology. And all these, there are several components which are involved in this physiology. We are going to study these aspects again. Again, to optimize the growth, we are studying the weedicides and pesticides. These are two approaches to block or to control the disease damage. And for that purpose, these two components are very important. And at the end, when we talk about the environment, we have to study the stress management also. And when we talk about the stress management, the salinity, sodicity, drought, and many other components, they come in the picture. And that's why it's called as a stress physiology. So all these approaches, they are studied either together when we study in the crop physiology, or they are studied independently in the crops, or keeping a particular crop in front of it or in front of our eyes to get the better management. So let us study some of these components one by one. When we talk about the seed physiology, you know well that the seed is the most important input in agriculture. So to begin with the agricultural land or to begin with the cropping pattern, it starts with the seedling, or it starts with the sowing purpose. So when we are to sow the seed, what should be the form of the seed sowing nature? What is the requirement, environmental requirement of seed germination? All these parameters, they are prime important. So germination of the seed and the proper establishment of the seedling, it depends upon the various internal and external factors. Internal means if the seed is immature, it is not going to get germinated. If the seed is mature and if it is falling on the rocks, it is not going to get germinated. So all this, because of that, the germination of the seed is requiring a proper nourishment, a proper place, and a proper time. Then only the seed will germinate. And not only germination is important, but the proper establishment of the seedling is also important. And for that purpose, all the whole process of germination and proper establishment of the seedling, it is depending upon the various internal and external factors. And all these factors, they are studied in seed physiology. The knowledge of seed physiology with the seed vigor and vitality helps in understanding the different physiological and morphological changes that occur during the germination. So obviously, when we talk about the seeds, there are two major aspects. The seed vigor. If the seed is stored for a very long time, the seed it is losing its vigor, and even though all the parameters are present, the seed will not germinate. Or even the seed is immature, the seed will not germinate. That's why these two parameters, the seed vigor and vitality, that is the capability to germinate, these two parameters, they are prime important. And because of that, in agriculture, you do know well that the farmers are much more keen in understanding where from to purchase the seeds, what can be the quality of germination percentage of the seeds, because they are going to give the better results at the end. So all these parameters, they are studied in seed physiology. So any deviation when the seed is not germinating, there are several parameters which are responsible for this. But one of the major parameter which is studied from the physiological point of view is nothing but it is the seed dormancy. So seed dormancy is nothing but the seed is having the vigor, the seed is having the vitality, but the seed is undergoing a resting phase. The seed is undergoing a sleeping phase, and then because of that, the seed will not germinate. This condition is called as a seed dormancy. And that seed dormancy, it is having a useful as well as the harmful effect. Because of the seed dormancy, it can withstand any harmful environmental condition like drought or summer, and then it will germinate in the rainy season. Or otherwise, if it is growing, the seedling may not develop properly. The dormant condition of the seed bars the immediate use of harvested seed for the next crop, which is important in intensive agriculture, because that's the prime importance in agriculture. Now we are seeing that many of the times, because of the unforeseen rains, even the seeds are falling on the ground, they are not germinating. They are undergoing dormancy, and these seeds, if at all corrected, they will grow only in the rainy season. They will germinate only in the rainy season, and that's why the seed dormancy is a very prime and important component. By establishing the causes and effects of this problem, the crop physiologists have come up with the different methods of breaking the seed dormancy, that is allowing the seeds to germinate at proper time, at proper place, at proper situation. So on one side we are having the seed vitality, and on another side we are having a capability of the seed to withhold itself, to control itself, then for germinating, and at proper time it germinates. Definitely it is going to give us a better yield or better result of the seed germination. When the seed is getting established, that is seed germination is taking place and seedling is formed, the next phase of the crop is ultimately development of a vegetative phase, development of a crop as such, or vegetative phase as such. So by knowing the process of radical and plumule emergence and their function, we can achieve the best plant health, which is the outcome of optimal physiological function. I suppose you all are coming from the rural areas and you know the importance of tillering. थोडक्यात मराठीत सांगतो, आपल्याकडं शेतामध्ये कुठलेही धान्य लावल्यानंतर किंवा अगदी शाळू लावल्यानंतर, गहू लावल्यानंतर, अगदी आपल्याकडं मका लावल्यानंतर, आपल्याकडं दाणे लावल्यानंतर, म्हणजे भुईमूग लावल्यानंतर सर्वच्या सर्व दाणे जरी उगून आले तरी सगळ्याच्या सगळ्या दाण्यांचं रोप होत नाही. आपल्याकडे शेतकरी काय करतात, त्याला उपणी करतात, टिलरिंग करतात. म्हणजे काय करतात, त्यातली कुजलेली रोपं, त्यातली कमी ताकदीची रोपं काढून टाकतात आणि जी भरभरून वाढणारी रोपं आहेत तेवढी शिल्लक ठेवतात, आणि मग तीच रोपं पुढे मोठी होतात आणि मग भरभरून धान्य देतात. सो दॅट्स वाय इट इज द प्रोसेस टू गिव्ह अ बेटर चान्स फॉर अ हेल्दी crop or healthy plant and to remove the weak ones, and this is the process which is giving us better opportunity for higher yield. And because of that, we have to identify, by knowing the process of radical and plumule emergence and their healthy function, we can achieve at the end the best plant health. Also, by knowing the different input requirements of the plant, obviously some are the soil water, the nutrients which are provided in the soil, even the proper sunlight, even the daylight and other parameters, etc. We can easily manage the plant population to get the highest yield. So all these parameters are required for the healthy growth of the crop. When we talk about the crop, right from the seedling formation, the establishment of the seedling, then the proper growth of crop, all these forms, it requires a very vital period. And during this vital period, The water is essential, the inorganic nutrients are essential, the sunlight is also essential, the temperature is essential. All these parameters, they are having the integral role because of which the plant population grows to the optimal, and ultimately then it will result in the highest yield. And when the crop is growing, there are several predictive mechanisms. Predictive means we have to assume that how much this particular crop is going to give us the yield at the end. The first prerequisite of the higher yields in the crop is the high total dry matter production per unit area. Dear friends, when we talk about the crop physiology, the most and utmost importance is given to the highest total dry matter production, that is the biomass production. And what is the biomass? Biomass is nothing but it is the maximum optimum photosynthesis. That is the nothing but formation of starch, formation of cellulose, because this starch and cellulose is going to provide the maximum seed starch at the end as a storage food material. And that's why the prerequisite of the higher yields in the crops is the high total dry matter production per unit area. And because of that, here in the growth measurement of the crop, the photosynthesis is most vital physiological process. The high diameter production is a function of optimum leaf area. So if the leaf area is maximum, automatically is going to respond, or it is going to receive the maximum sunlight. And when it is going to receive the maximum sunlight, it is undergoing maximum photosynthesis, and that's why it is synthesizing a very high amount of starch at the end. And that's why when we talk about the growth measurement of the crop, we talk about the CGR, we talk about the NAR, that is the gross crop growth rate, as well as the net assimilation rate. So it is always calculated by various formulae. So CGR is calculated by the LAI. LAI is nothing but the leaf area index, and NAR, that is the net assimilation rate. That is, net assimilation rate is nothing but it is the maximum photosynthesis which is taking place during the given time in the per unit area, because that is going to give you the highest biomass at the end. When we talk about the NAR, ultimately we have to go ahead and study the harvest index. Harvest means it is nothing but it is the final biomass which is produced. It is the final produce which is produced. And harvest means it is nothing but it is the highest last yield or productivity of the plant. The difference between the total amount of dry matter produced and the photosynthase used in the respiration is nothing but the net product of the photosynthesis. Means on one side the photosynthesis is taking place and starch is being synthesized. On other side, the photosynthesis is taking place only during daytime, but the respiration is taking place 24 hours. And during the respiration, the synthesized starch is being used for its catabolism, its breakdown into glucose, and glucose is utilized for generating the power, ATP molecules. Remember, the photosynthesis is taking place only in the leaves, but all the plant tissue, all the living body of the plant is undergoing respiration. Means production is taking place only in the leaves, but its utilization and consumption is taking place by the whole plant body. And that's why we have to calculate this, we have to compare this. And that's why the difference between the total amount of diameter and the total amount utilized during the respiration, that is going to give you the net product of the photosynthesis. And that's why, remember dear friends, always the rate of photosynthesis is maximum and the rate of respiration is minimal times it is minimal, and because of that the plants will grow at a very faster rate. You do know that many of the plants, they can achieve their maximum height or maximum width and growth just within 100 days, just within 60 days. मला खूपशी क्रॉप माहिती आहेत की हे क्रॉप साधारणपणे एका महिन्यापासून 1.5 महिन्यापर्यंत पूर्णपणे वाढतं. म्हणजे त्याची ग्रोथ एवढी फास्ट असते की एकापासून रेस्पिरेशन होत जरी असलं तर प्रोडक्शन त्याचं एवढं जोरात असतं की त्यामुळे ते प्लांट खूप वेगाने वाढू शकतं. एक उदाहरण तुम्हाला ज्वारीचं देऊ इच्छितो की ज्वारीचा प्लांट तुम्हाला सगळ्यांना माहिती आहे. ज्वारी माहिती आहे सगळ्यांना की ज्वारी पेरल्यानंतर 1.5 महिन्यामध्ये त्याची उंची, त्या ताटाची झाडीच्या त्या ज्वारीच्या झाडाची उंची ही कमीत कमी 5 फूट होते फक्त 1.5 महिन्यामध्ये. So that is nothing but it's the ultimate final harvest. Because of that, the economic yield depends on how the dry matter is ultimately distributed among the different organs of the plant. Here, this point is very crucial because when we are growing the crop, we are growing the crop not to have its vegetative growth, but we are growing the crop because the maximum assimilate, the maximum sugar should be used for synthesizing the grains, and that's why the large number of grains means the large number of yield or the large number of harvest. And then when we are talking about this plant growth, we have to minimize the other controlling or disturbing parameters, and one of the parameter is the growth of weeds in the field. Because the weeds, they compete with the water, the weeds, they always compete with the nutrients, the weeds always compete with the space, and because of that the farmers, they are always keen about removing these weeds from the field, and so that the minimal weed means maximum production. And for that purpose they can use the various chemicals, poisons, and these poisons are known as the weedicides or herbicides. The use of weedicides or herbicides to kill the unwanted plants or weeds is widespread in modern agriculture, because this particular trend was not available previously, but in 20th century we have started using the weedicides and to control the losses of the crop. So in 20th century we designed, established and prepared several weedicides so as to control the weeds. The majority of the weeds by function, about half of the commercially important compounds, they are acting by interrupting the photosynthetic electron flow. Means these are the weeds which are blocking the double bonds of the cytochromes. They are blocking the molecules of enzymes. So that's why they interact with the photosynthetic electron flow like paraquat, diathron, bavistine and many others, or the electron flow of the respiration. Means in the weeds, with the light reaction is not taking place, it means it is not undergoing further the Calvin cycle. When it is not going for the Calvin cycle, the starch is not going to get synthesized and it will going to block the CO2 assimilation, and thus the weeds are killed by starvation. Because even respiration also, when they are blocking the terminal oxidase enzyme, that is A3, cytochrome A3, when it is blocking the A3, ultimately there is no any formation of ATP generation. When the ATPs are not generated, all other metabolic activities are blocked, they are stopped, and because of that the weeds will starve and they will die. So that is the basic function of the weedicides. But when we talk about the crop physiology, apart from the seed physiology and photosynthesis, the major issue of concern is nutriophysiology. Nutrio means nutrients. Nutrients mean nothing but it is the food supply, what the plant is requiring. So what the plants require? For the better biomass, the plants will require consistently supply of inorganic elements. So for the healthy growth of crop, around 17 essential inorganic elements are required. Almost most of the elements, they are provided from the soil. Obviously, when we are discussing this, we are not considering the three parameters. One, we are not considering the carbon which is available from the atmosphere. We are not considering the hydrogen which is coming up in the form of water from the soil. And also we are not considering the oxygen which is available from the air. So apart from the CHO, the other 17 essential inorganic elements are important. So these are, as you know, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and then magnesium, calcium, and sulfur. You know well, the nitrogen is important from the amino acids and proteins. The phosphorus is the integral part of the phosphates and ATP. The potassium is the most important coupling agent, cofactor in all majority enzymes. More than 400 enzymes are requiring this K. And you know well, the potassium is responsible for the ion exchange across the membrane. You know the calcium, because the calcium is responsible for the physiology of the stomata. We do know the magnesium because the magnesium is integral part of the chlorophyll molecule. And then we are knowing the sulfur because sulfur is nothing but it is a responsible component of the DNA and RNA. So all these are major elements, but there are many others also: iron, copper, manganese, molybdenum, zinc, boron, nickel, Si, that is silicates, then to some extent aluminium, and even the chlorides are also important. So all these nutrients, and majority of these nutrients, they are taken up by the plant from the roots. They are present in the soil, and that's why what the farmers do, the farmers provide these in the form of fertilizers: NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. They are provided in the form of fertilizers. Nowadays, in 21st century, the farmers are using organic fertilizers, what we know as the manures. And these manures, they also provide these micronutrients also. So the knowledge of nutriophysiology has helped in identification of essential inorganic nutrients, their ion uptake mechanism, and also their deficiency symptoms. Because if they are not available in optimal quantity, then the plant growth will not be normal. And under deficient conditions, the plant growth will get blocked, hampered. And that's why it's very important. And then to overcome this, the corrective measures. Corrective measures means what can be done. If at all the deficiency symptoms are shown, how we can overcome these deficiency symptoms. So all these aspects, they are studied under nutriophysiology. The nutriophysiology also involves, it helps to check the toxicity substance of various nutrients. Not only that, these essential elements are required, but they are required in essential quantity and of essential quality. But in soil, it is not like a market. All the things are available in the normal form. It is not a supermarket. It is not a grocery. But in the soil, all these components are available at freelance level. And because there are some components, when they are present in the high concentration, even the plants or the crops may suffer from their toxicity effects. The major toxicity is shown by the sodium, it is shown by the chlorides, it is shown by the sulfates, it is shown by the iron, it is shown by the calcium, even sometimes even it is shown by the potassium. So the toxicity of these elements also is important because it is going to block the plant growth and how to overcome them. Ultimately, the use of fertilizers and their intake by the plants can be totally understood by studying the specific plant or crop physiology. And because of that, nutriophysiology is one of the most integral component of crop physiology. because ultimately when we wish to go ahead with the having the optimum harvest, optimum productivity, we have to control the nutrient uptake of the plants. When the plant is growing and when it is coming to the reproductive phase, these two parameters, the physiological phenomenon, they play a very vital role. One is photoperiodism and another is vernalization. Photoperiodism is nothing but a response of the plants to the relative length of the day and night. The length of the day and night for flowering, it is called the photoperiodism. Especially photoperiodism is nothing but the long duration of night or longer duration of darkness which is required by the plant or by the crop to synthesize specific hormones. If that light is not available or the darkness is not available, the specific hormones are not synthesized, and when the specific hormones are not synthesized, the plant will not grow, will not go into the next mode of reproductive physiology, or it will produce the flowers. Now this photoperiodism is important component for choosing the crops for Kharif and Rabi season at different geographical localities. All over the world, you know well that we are having the different seasons, and everywhere, specifically in the Rabi season, the nights are longer, days are shorter, and that's why we are having also with us the Kharif and Rabi pattern. The plants which are grown in the Rabi pattern or which require a longer night, they cannot be grown in the Kharif pattern. For example, with us, we are having so many plants which are grown in the Rabi pattern, but the most important plant is the wheat. The wheat has to be grown only in the Rabi season. Groundnut has to be grown in the Rabi season. The gram is to be grown in the Rabi season. So there are so many crops which are sensitive to this photoperiodism. Or otherwise, there are many plants which are not sensitive to the photoperiodism, and then they can be grown in the Kharif season. So other plants like cotton, the many vegetables, even the rice, even the java, they are of photoperiodism insensitive plants, and that's why they can be grown in the both seasons. Along with that, there is one more effect, and that effect is vernalization. That is, it is the induction of flowering process by the exposure to the prolonged low temperature. Now, when the crop is growing in the field, naturally you cannot reduce the temperature, and because of that, ultimately you have to select the crops which are responsible or which are sensitive to the vernalization, so that they should be grown only in the Rabi season. That is, they should be planted only in the month of November, December, January, so that they can get the maximum low temperatures during their plant growth, so that they can ultimately undergo further and go for the flowering process. So the two physiological processes, photoperiodism and vernalization, they are very important and crucial in selecting the crops in the given region, given area, for getting the maximum better yield. When we talk ahead, ultimately all these physiological processes, they are integrated, they are controlled, they are regulated by the hormones. You do know well, the plants can regulate their growth through internal growth mechanism involving an action of extremely low concentrations of chemical substances which are synthesized by the leaves and then transported to the growing apexes, and these are called as the plant growth substances, or they are also called as the phytohormones, or they are also called as the plant growth regulators. Now there are two components. Sometimes these integral plant growth hormones, they are changing the phase of the plants from seedling phase to plant vegetative growth phase, from vegetative growth phase ultimately to the flowering phase or the fruiting phase. But many of the times, in order to initiate the flowering, initiate to fruit setting, or initiate the seed setting, particularly in the horticultural plants, we can supply the external supply of these hormones. And the most important role which is being played is by the kinetin and ethylene. You know well, in horticultural, many of the fruits, they can be matured. Early maturity can be done by, or the maturity can be blocked by treating these plants or treating these fruits with the ethylene treatment. I suppose you are knowing this. We are knowing that to have the larger grape size or larger fruit size, we use the gibberellic acid in the grapes. The regulation of flowering, seed formation, and fruit setting has been controlled through the application of different hormones. Now, these may be natural hormones or they may be synthetic plant inducers or growth inducers or growth regulators at the appropriate time of the plant height. Height in the sense at a phase, at what phase, and the age of the plant. And because of that, the plant growth regulators, they are very important and they are very extensively used, particularly not in agriculture, but they are extensively used in horticultural crops. When we talk about the plant growth and when we talk about the environment, this is one of the important parameter which is being controlled, and the parameter is water use efficiency or transpiration efficiency. The amount of dry matter produced per unit amount of water respired. Because when the plant is growing, the plant is undertaking large amount of water from the soil. And that's why there is a large requirement of the soil, a large requirement of water by the plant. Because this much amount of water is being transpired. Obviously, when we are supplying the nutrients, to uptake these nutrients by the plant, the water is required. And because of that, the water use efficiency of the plants is very critical. You do know that sugar cane, it loses its harvest index, it loses its potential when the extra water is supplied to the field. On the contrary, the sugar content is decreased by the extra water or under waterlogged condition by the sugarcane plant. Or otherwise, many of the plants, when they do not get the sufficient water, they are under growth condition, and this drought condition ultimately results in poor yield. The importance of water use efficiency in influencing the grain yield under the water limited conditions can be obtained by a simple formula. This is a small formula which has been shown, but such a type of various formulae are available with which we can calculate the efficiency of the plant. This formula says that the grain yield is equal to T into TE. What is a T? The total transpiration by the crop canopy into the transpiration efficiency or water use efficiency into the harvest index. And dear friends, because of that, in order to control the excessive transpiration, even the farmers, they use anti-transpirants, or they spray the gelatin, or they spray the wax on the leaves so that transpiration can be blocked. And because of the blocking of the transpiration, they can try to minimize the water use efficiency by the plants. Ultimately, when we are going to the last component of the plant development, this is nothing but formation of fruits and seeds. Dear friends, the post-harvested physiology is a totally separate branch of physiology which is being studied. Because in the post-harvest physiology, after getting the grains, or after getting the seeds and before its use, how we can control their decrease in the quality and quantity, that is controlled by the post-harvest physiology. The moisture and temperature are the two important factors that are causing the physiological changes that reduce the post-harvest quality of the grains. Because when the fruit is present, you know when the fruit is perishable, even though it is removed from the plant, it continues its physiological process. And the process of senescence, the process of abscission, the process of degradation continues. And that's why we have to control this process through the post-harvest physiology. Being a perishable in nature, the magnitude of the post-harvest loss is comparatively higher in horticultural crops. Many of the times, the total losses of crops or the production through the yield is more than 40%. It has been found that almost 60% of the crops, they are lost before being used. म्हणजे एका अर्थानं आपल्याकडे जेवढं धान्य पिकतं त्या धान्यातले जवळ 60% धान्य हे नासाडी होतं, हे वाया जातं, हे लोकांच्या तोंडात पोहोचत नाही. कारण त्याच्यामध्ये अनेक फॅक्टर्स असतात की ज्या फॅक्टरमुळं जे धान्य तयार होतं ते धान्य किडतं, त्या धान्याच्या प्रोसेसमध्ये त्याची क्वालिटी कमी होते आणि त्यामुळं मग ते धान्य खराब होऊन जातं, त्याला कीड पडते आणि त्यामुळं मग धान्य तयार झाल्यापासून ते वापरण्यापर्यंत जो कालावधी आहे त्याच्यामध्ये हाऊ टू मेंटेन इट्स quality, that is the most important component, and that component is understood and studied by the post-harvest physiology. Even in horticulture, the shelf life of cut flowers can be increased by application of kinetin. अशा काही शेकडो उदाहरण आहेत. आपल्याकडचे हॉट कट फ्लावर जे असतात, मग झरबेरा असेल, ग्लॅडिओलस असेल किंवा इतर प्लांट्स असतील किंवा गुलाब असेल, सगळ्यात महत्त्वाचं हा कट केल्यापासून तुम्ही शेतातून काढल्यापासून तो प्रत्यक्ष वापरायच्या नेण्यापर्यंत काही कालावधी लागू शकतो. इव्हन आपल्याकडचा ग्लॅडिओलस इथं कट केल्यानंतर किंवा गुलाब इथं कट केल्यानंतर तो परदेशी पाठवतात, त्यामुळे 2-3 दिवस लागतात. त्या 2-3 दिवसामध्ये ते फूल जसे तसं राहावं याच्यासाठी त्याला स्प्रेइंग केलं जातं. सो दॅट इज द इम्पॉर्टंट कंपोनंट ऑफ पोस्ट हार्वेस्ट फिजियोलॉजी. Even though we are discussing this up to the seed formation and its utilization, there are two components which are environmental components which are playing a major role in controlling or limiting the crop yield, and that is, the first is the pathophysiology. See, when the plant is producing a large amount of food in the form of glucose and starch, this is a ready-made food which is available to a large amount of microbes. So they are bacteria, they are viruses, they are fungi, even they are pesticides, they are insects, protozoans like nematodes, and they are parasites. All these, they are getting this ready-made food material like a supermarket, and that's why the plants are always subject to these pathogens. And when the pathogens attack to the plants, we call that the plants get diseases. And that's why to understand this host pathogen relationship and host pathogen interaction, this is another branch of physiology. And this branch is called as either plant pathology, or this branch is also called as pathophysiology. Now this pathophysiology includes three components: study of host, study of pathogen, and the interaction. Here there is again one more component which is important, and that is the synthesis of secondary metabolites, synthesis of plant inducers, and synthesis of growth retardants. These are specialized compounds which are synthesized either by the host or by the pathogen to overcome and to conquer this battle. And because of that, the host pathogen interaction is very important to understand. And when we are trying to understand this, it should be understood at three different levels. The first level is the morphological, that is whether the disease is a ectoform, that is present superficially, or it is present inside the plant body, endophytic form, ectophytic or endophytic, and then depending upon its morphological form, then the physiological role which is played by the host as well as by the pathogen, and the biochemical role again which is played in order to control the defense mechanism, the attacking mechanism and the defense mechanism. It is the biochemical role which is being played by the host and the pathogen. All this holistic integral approach of understanding this study, this is called as a pathophysiology. Ultimately, because of this, the plants can be categorized into two categories: the disease resistant plants or disease tolerant plants or disease susceptible plants. आपल्याला माहिती आहे की खूप प्रचंड मोठ्या प्रमाणावरती द्राक्षाची नासाडी होते, डाळिंबांची नासाडी होते. तुम्हाला माहिती आहे का आता सध्या संपूर्ण महाराष्ट्रामध्ये डाळिंबावरती गेल्या 6 वर्षापासून तेल्या रोग पडतो की ज्याच्यावरती उपाय सापडलेला नाही. So this is a sort of a disease which is ultimately limiting the crop harvest, crop yield. And that's why the plant pathology or plant pathological and physiological studies ultimately lead to the loss of crop productivity. So this is a sort of a host pathogen interaction, which is a biological interaction, but even many of the times the environment plays its vital role. And this environment, when it plays the vital role, is called the salinity, sodicity, and drought. So these are the environmental phenomena which are responsible for limiting the production. Salinity is one of the major constraints in sustainable food production in many parts of the world. So salinity is a major problem, particularly because of the heavy water supply and heavy chemical fertilizers. In India, the area under salt affected soils is about 6.73 million hectares. Now this is about more than, let me tell you, 37% of the total agricultural land. So we have already lost more than 40% of the land under saline condition. So maximum loss has come from the Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, obviously Maharashtra because of the sugar cane, West Bengal because of the tag, and Rajasthan again because of the brassica, muri, sarso. Together it is accounting for almost 75% of the loss of saline and sodic soils in the country. So almost it's a major loss. The soil is becoming non-agricultural land. It is becoming saline soil or sodic soil where the crops cannot be grown. Now, the soil reaction, its EC, electrical conductivity, the soil saturation extract, and exchangeable sodium percentage. Because when we talk about the salinity, here the saline soil is having the maximum concentration of sodium, chlorides, and sulfates. So the sodium is present in the form of either sodium chloride or sodium sulfate, and because of the high concentration of sodium, the potassium becomes not available to the plants. The plants cannot tolerate the sodium, and because of that, ultimately the plants will dry and they will lose their production. So ultimately the sodium absorption ratio are the criteria which are used to classify the salt affected soils. So these are agricultural parameters to identify the saline soil. The plants growing in the salt affected soils exhibit two distinct phases. which means these are responsible plants towards the saline condition. What are the responses? One, it is undergoing a osmotic stress. Because of the salinity, the osmotic potential is disturbed, and because of the plants get subjected to the artificial drought condition or artificial water stress condition. And secondly, it is salt stress condition, that is the excess amount of sodium in the plant body which is blocking the entry of potassium. And remember, potassium is one of the most essential elements to the plants, and because of that, ultimately all these parameters, they are blocking the growth inhibition. Ultimately they are blocking the plant to get converted into the reproductive phase, and that's why the losses of the salinity, many of the times they are more than 60% in the areas, depending upon the responses of the plant, that is crops, to the saline soils. The crop varieties, now they are identified either as a crop sensitive variety or salt tolerant, sorry, not crop, salt sensitive variety or salt tolerant variety. Almost all agricultural universities, almost all academic universities, and the agricultural colleges, the botany departments all over the world, now they are working on this aspect very crucially, because they want to create the salt tolerant plants. But at the present, the situation and the picture is very meager. It is not promising, because on one side the saline soil is getting increased day by day, and on the contrary the plants are subjected to soil sensitive phase, and that's why they cannot tolerate the high salt concentration. When we talk about the sodicity, it is nothing but sodic condition. Means when the crop is grown in an area where the potassium is present in the excess, when the calcium is present in the excess, when the magnesium is present in the excess, these are the earth elements, and because of the soil becomes sodic. Sodic means the pH of the soil, it goes beyond 7.5. You know well that sodic condition is nothing but when the soil is having its own pH 7.5 or more than 7.5. It is usually 8, 8.2, even it can reach up to 9.2. So under sodic conditions, the nutrient uptake is damaged. Under sodic conditions, even the ion transport mechanism is damaged, and because of that, under sodic conditions, again the plants show inhibition. The plants cannot grow normally, and because of that, the plants are subjected to the loss. The factors responsible for the formation of sodic soils, obviously the pH higher than 7.5, it include the alternate wet and dry seasons. So rainy season followed by the dry season, which is going to change the sodic condition of the soil. The groundwater containing the carbonates and bicarbonates, desalinization and reduction of sulfate ions under anaerobic conditions, it creates the sodic condition of the soil. And this is also one of the major problems in Asiatic soils, Asian countries, and it is one of the major problems of India as well. Majority of the sodic soils in Indo-Gangetic plains seems to have formed because of the alternate wet and dry seasons. So this is one of the reasons which is identified. So stress physiology again is a separate branch which has to be studied by the crop physiologists. And lastly, when we go about the drought, the Indian agriculture being predominantly rain-fed by the nature, so the development of the drought resistance varieties is very important. And so many of the agricultural universities, they try to develop the new varieties which are drought resistant. But it is not so simple, it is not so easy, and it is not possible also. Because it is not possible with all crops. Obviously, the root zone development, root zone depth, the density of roots, the plant water potential, relative water content, water use efficiency, xerophytic characters of the leaves, etc. These are some of the important characters helped to breed the drought tolerant varieties and to develop the efficient irrigation management practices in some crops, not all crops. This is possible in some crops, but a major lot of crops, they are waiting to get the better results from agricultural universities. And because of that, in India, as you know well, in 21st century, you do know that environment is showing a lot of fluctuations. It is having the heavy rains and it is also having the extended dry season. And because of that, the plants are subjected, the crops are subjected to the drought condition. And obviously, this drought condition is responsible for no yield at all. आपल्याकडे तुम्हाला सगळ्यांना माहिती आहे की आपल्याकडे एक तर ओला दुष्काळ पडतो तो कोरडा दुष्काळ पडतो ज्यावेळेला या दुष्काळामुळे पीक येत नाही. आणि सगळ्यात चांगलं किंवा सगळ्यात विदारक उदाहरण म्हणजे विदर्भाचं आहे की ज्या भागामधला कापूस, ज्या भागामधला भुईमूग, ज्या भागामधला मूग, ज्या भागामधला उडीद शेतकऱ्यांच्या हातात पडत नाही आणि मग त्या भागातले शेतकरी दुर्दैवानं खूप प्रचंड मोठ्या संख्येनं आत्महत्या करतात. तर ड्राउट प्रॉब्लेम is one of the major problem. It is one of the major concern of plant physiologists or agriculturalists in India, and that's why drought is one of the major issues of study by the physiological scientists. Thus, the physiological understanding of crop plants provides the fundamental scientific base about various aspects of metabolism, growth and development, as this helps together integrately, as it helps in improvising the crop productivity or at least understanding the limitations of the crop productivity. And for that purpose, the crop physiology is one of the more major essential component to be understood by the botanist. This is immensely important for the crop improvement. Obviously, when we go for the finding out new strains, new varieties, new cultivars, all these parameters are to be considered for better improvement of the crop and also technology improvement, because ultimately technology also can provide the better yield at the end. Also in agriculture as well as in horticulture, as the crop physiology and essentially the plant physiology is one of the major branch of study, we felt that all the PG students of botany, they must learn the plant physiology as their basic subject, plant physiology as their primary subject. And because of that, in our college, we have added the plant physiology even at the entry level, that is MSc Part first level, and specifically at MSc Part second level in plant physiology, we have introduced this as a special paper. So I am very much happy that many students, they have opted for plant physiology as their specialization, and there are many good opportunities to all the students who have undertaken the plant physiology and also related aspects of study, so that they can come forward in the future and take on the research on different aspects, not only which are related with agriculture, but they are related with the plant physiology, they are related with the weed physiology, or even they are related with the ecophysiology. So all these parameters, they're equally important, and they're waiting for the very enthusiastic students like you. And that's why I felt that I should have an interaction with you people, an introduction of this new branch, new aspect of crop physiology, and also the importance of crop physiology in agriculture. I feel that with this small introduction, you might have realized how much important it is that in agricultural field or in agricultural area like India, there is a very much strong need of a plant physiologist or crop physiologist. And because of that, all over India, whatever institute, research institutes are present, these institutes, either they are from the IARI, Indian Agriculture Research Institute, ICRI, Indian Council of Agriculture Research, or CSIR, uh, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. Wherever they are having their own branches, all these branches they have incorporated the plant physiologists in them. I'm very much happy that you people are fortunate that just nearby 6 kilometers around Baramati, we are having the NIAM where there is a group of ICR scientists who are studying the stress management of crops. And we are happy that we are having a collaboration with that institution. And many of our PG students, they are working together. They are going ahead for summer vacation programs. They are going ahead for several certificate programs and hands-on training programs with that institution also. Also, our TC College, the Botany Department, is having a collaboration with the Pomegranate Research Center at Solapur. And because of that, this is a horticultural research institute, and many of our students they go in Solapur also as a plant physiologist, and they undertake very small projects. So I feel that with this uh, thorough discussion of importance of plant physiology, the different components of plant physiology, the different phenomena, the processes in plant physiology, how they are interacting ultimately with the crop productivity, we have realized that crop to understand or to study the crop physiology is utmost importance. So I congratulate you for listening very patiently, and I also congratulate those MSc Part Second students who have opted for plant physiology for this specialization. I wish you all best of luck and hope that in coming days you will come forward as eminent physiologists to help out the pure farmers of 21st century. Thank you. Have a great day. Stay safe and study well. With these few words, now I stop here. Now I will go for the chat box. If at all there are any questions, any queries, any issues, you can raise the questions, raise the queries, or you can ask me through opening your unmuted audio. And if at all you are happy and satisfied, and if at all there are no queries, you can leave by adding your presentation attendance in the chat box. Wish you all the best. Thank you. Have a great time.